Will South Carolina's football team be better or worse on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball this fall? The answer lies somewhere in the middle.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also the lead publisher for Gamecock Digest over on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both wherever you get your audio podcasts daily and also on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We gotta talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We're going to talk a little bit of football once again to start this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. And mainly, we're going to talk about how much better could this team be in the 2024 season, or could they actually take a step back? And I think the answer, again, lies somewhere in the middle on both sides of the ball. So to get into this conversation, let's start off with the offense. When you look back at the stats that this side of the ball compiled in the 2023 season, the Gamecocks averaged 278 passing yards per game. That was good for 24th nationally. They also averaged only 85.1 rushing yards per game, which ranked 129th nationally, the fifth worst mark in the entire country. And they scored on average 26 points per game, which ranked 77th nationally. So starting off with the passing game, do I think that it's going to be better or worse this coming season? I think that the passing game is going to be worse. And this doesn't have everything to do with Lenore Sellers. It's not all on him. Although his inexperience, I do think, is going to play a role in this. Because, look, Sellers, he is going to be a first-time starter in this offense this coming fall. And he's got to deal with a really tough schedule, including some brutal road games against teams like Kentucky, Alabama, Oklahoma, and the Clemson Tigers at the end of the season. Spencer Rattler is not walking through that door. And obviously, Lenore Sellers, through his own merit, through his own athletic abilities, has a chance to be a great quarterback here at South Carolina. But in terms of pure arm talent, I don't think he quite matches up to what Spencer Rattler showed us this past year, at least not right now. And then you look at the wide receiving core. There's a lack of clear downfield weapons in this position room. You look at a Dalvin Campbell that South Carolina just landed from Nevada just a week or so ago. He's going to have to step up there immediately, probably, if you're South Carolina. You're also going to hope that Nick Harper, once he gets completely reacclimated with the football program, is going to, quite literally, hit the ground running once again, and that he'll take another step forward from the glimpses that he showed in 2023. And then the other thing to note here is this, and I know I've talked about the small stature of some of these wide receivers plenty of times this offseason, but we do have to take into account that that small stature is not just going to hurt South Carolina down the field. It's likely also going to hurt them when it comes to the screen game in the passing game, because, look, more often than not, if you've got smaller builds at the wide receiver spot, they're probably not going to do a good enough job fending off SEC caliber cornerbacks throughout an entire football game. And so that is going to hurt you there as well. So for all those reasons, I think the passing game, statistically speaking, will be worse in 2024. Now, moving on to the running game, I think this one's pretty obvious. I think that this facet of the offense is going to be much better this coming fall. It all starts, in my opinion, with the depth. Last year, you had Dakereon Joyner, a former quarterback, turned into wide receiver, then turned into running back, starting for you in week 1 against North Carolina. With all due respect to Dakereon Joyner, let's just say you're not going to run into that problem this season. You've got a former first-team All-SEC running back in Raheim Rocket Sanders that's going to be starting there for you. But you've also got quality backs behind him that can help give him a breather every so often when he needs it. You've got an Oscar Attaway that transfers in from North Texas. Attaway, I think, showed in the spring game that, look, you give him some space in between the tackles, he can make some work out of it. He can get some tough bull yards when you need it. And then you've got guys like a Jawarn Howell, the transfer from South Carolina State, and also a Dontavius Braswell, Matthew Fuller. There's a ton of capable bodies back there. Juju McDowell. This room is, in my opinion, one of the deepest in the entire SEC. So depth automatically is going to make the running game situation a lot better this coming season. Also, you're going to be pairing this up with a dynamic quarterback as far as his athleticism and his size is concerned. Lenore Sellers, again, is listed about 6'3", 6'4", 240-something pounds. He runs a sub-4 640, in my opinion, when it comes to his 40-yard dash type speed. That's scary, even for an SEC defense to have to contend with. You pair that up with the deep running back room that you've got, that is also going to help you. You've also got a Jared Brown at the wide receiver spot who was used in some unique ways in Coastal Carolina's offense the past couple years. He can help you out there. So you got a ton of weapons that are going to be on the field at all times that are legitimate running threats that the defense is going to have to contend with. You got diverse skill sets. And then lastly, looking at the O-line, look, I know that people still have some question marks about that group. I do as well. But it quite literally cannot be as bad as it was last year. It just can't. Unless this room gets ravished with injuries again, in which case there are some bigger questions that need to be asked about strength and conditioning and injury prevention, then the running game should absolutely be a lot better this next season. And then the final thing I want to talk about real quickly is scoring offense. Again, the team averaged 26 points per game offensively in 2023. I think they're going to be slightly better in 2024. I think that the more dynamic running game is going to help out the Gamecocks tremendously, especially in the red zone, because last year, South Carolina basically, on the offensive side of the ball, had to live and die by the big play. And that usually meant Spencer Rattler somehow finding a way to get the ball to Xavier Legette more often than not. When that was not working, this offense just had no real way to threaten a capable defense. I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue this year. Sure, you might not be able to hit as many downfield passes as you did a year ago, but I think that death by 1,000 paper cuts, getting 5 yards here, 4 yards here, maybe a 10, 12-yard explosive play over here, I think that that can help out this offense tremendously. We also should take into account that kicker Mitch Jeter is no longer on the roster. That is going to hurt this team, in my opinion, and I get it. South Carolina's had a great history in recent years of pumping out really solid and consistent college-level kickers. But Mitch Jeter, he was something special. I mean, he almost hit all of his field goals 2 seasons ago. Last year, yes, he did take maybe a slight step back, but I mean, he was still one of the better kickers, in my opinion, in the entire SEC. So that is probably going to hurt this team a little bit in terms of how many points they get this year, which is the main reason why I capped this at slightly better instead of saying they will outright be better in terms of scoring points in 2024. So, we talked about the offensive side of the ball now. We're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball. How much better can that unit be? We'll talk about those guys in a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who made the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen, wherever you get your audio podcasts daily, or your first watch on YouTube. All right, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball now for South Carolina and how much better that unit could be this upcoming football season. And much like the offensive side of the ball, I think that the defense is going to be better for the most part. Maybe there's an area or two where they could take a step back, but overall, I think that the ceiling is going to be a lot higher for the defense in 2024. Let's start off with rush defense. I think that this unit is going to be a lot better in that regard this coming football season. Now, they gave up an average of 149.4 rushing yards per game in 2023, ranked 67th nationally. I think they could do better than that because the depth in the defensive front, I think, is significantly better. You look at the additions along the defensive line and edge rusher groups. You've got DeAndre Jules that you add from Pittsburgh. Monkel Goodwine from Alabama. Going to be some added depth at defensive tackle. Edge rusher, you've got Gilbert Edmond now back with the program. You got Georgia Tech transfer Kyle Kennard. 5-star true freshman Dylan Stewart. And then you look at linebacker. This unit, in my opinion, is going to be a lot faster and more athletic. And when you pair that up with a higher usage rate of that 3-3 defensive front, I think that this defense is going to be better equipped to chase down and stymie ball carriers on outside or perimeter runs. So for all of those reasons, I think the rush defense will take another step forward here in 2024. In terms of pass defense, I kind of struggled with this one, but I decided to go with slightly better because I think that a better rush defense is always a great elixir for maybe a bad pass defense. Because if you can get your opponent into more 3rd and 12, 3rd and 15, maybe 3rd and 18 type situations instead of it being 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 3, 3rd and 1, obviously, that's going to help out your guys that are going to be rushing the quarterback. Again, I also think that this edge rusher group is so much better this year when you talk about Kennard, Stewart, and Edmond. Last season, I think that Jordan Stroughton, I honestly feel bad for him because he was coming off of an ACL rehab process that he had gone through for the majority of the offseason. He comes back, and he was basically asked to be the top edge rusher for this team. And obviously, it did not work out very well, and that's not Jordan Stroughton's fault. They should have probably been better prepared for that, and they weren't. This time around, I think that they'll be a little bit better in this department. I think you'll see a lot more individual efforts that lead to sacks in 2024. The reason why I say I think pass defense will only be slightly better is because I still have concerns about the outside cornerback position. O'Donnell Fortune, again, as long as he is mentally focused throughout the duration of the season, I think he's going to be just fine. But who's going to start alongside him? More than likely, you're going to be relying on a very young player at that position, no matter who takes that spot. Whether it's Judge Collier, maybe if Akari Swain continues to take strides at that position, or maybe even a Jalewis Solomon, who hasn't even gotten to campus yet, ends up taking the reins at that spot. But either way, I do think that that means that you'll probably see maybe a few more big plays given up, and it'd be more so because of maybe just a misplay at the outside corner spot. So for that reason, I think pass defense will be better, but only by just a little bit. And then when looking at scoring defense, this defense gave up 26.3 points per game last season. That ranked 66th nationally. By the way, almost forgot with the passing stats. This defense gave up 246.3 passing yards per game in 2023. That was 102nd nationally. But getting back to scoring defense, I also think, once again, that this defense will be slightly better in this regard because I think that with having a better rush defense, forcing more third and long situations. You're going to be putting the opposing offense, in a tough bind where they're going to have to connect on more big plays. And more often than not, if that's the situation that the majority of these college football offenses get put in, they're not going to be able to convert. But I do think that, again, because of the potential concerns at cornerback, there will be times where there'll be certain opponents that will still be able to work their way around that. But even if that's the case, I think that this defense is going to be better equipped when it comes to red zone defense, because when you're in the red zone, obviously, you don't have nearly as much space to work with in the passing game. And in this area, I think that you get your money's worth when it comes to the run game. Who's got the better rush offense or rush defense? And I really think that this rush defense can do well enough to where South Carolina can get more red zone stops, force more field goals, and therefore lower the point totals that they give up to their opponents in 2024. So overall, across the board, I think the defense is going to be better. How much better is probably going to depend on mainly that outside corner spot, and potentially how much can they get out of that new reformed or revamped edge rusher group with Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, Gilbert Edmond, and also plenty of other guys behind them, a Brian Thomas Jr. or Desmond Umeozulu. There's plenty of bodies there, but how many of those guys step up and make big plays when they need them in 2024? We'll, of course, find out when the season arrives in late August. Now, the baseball team is currently in season at the moment, and they are hitting a pivotal stretch at the end of the regular season where they're trying to get the best position for the postseason as humanely possible. Last week, it looked like the baseball team was well positioned for a solid top overall seed heading into the postseason, but now these same people are a lot lower on the Gamecocks, and I don't quite understand it. We'll talk about this in a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about this, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get in Monopoly Go, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, along with cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Today's show is also brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis that you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. We cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. All right, let's talk about South Carolina's baseball team here for just a couple of minutes. And not so much the baseball team itself, but more so where they're projected to go in the postseason. Now, if you follow college baseball closely, you would know that The most important thing with the postseason is getting a top 16 overall seed. If you secure a top 16 overall seed, then that means that you'll end up hosting a regional where you have 3 teams that travel on down there that are seeded 2 through 4, and then obviously 1 seed plays the 4 seed, the 2 versus the 3, so on and so forth, and you play sort of a round robin type format. I'm probably actually wrong on that, so don't quote me on that, but the point is, you get a chance to have an easy path to get to the Super Regionals, in which if you want to host for the Super Regionals, you need a top 8 overall seed. Anyways, now that I've provided some proper context, here's where I'm going with all this. South Carolina, according to D1Baseball.com, this past Wednesday, they were going to be a number 10 overall seed heading into the tournament. And obviously, that's not a guarantee, but that's where the projection had them. D1Baseball.com updated their Field of 64 projection today. And when they released them, I was astonished because South Carolina was slotted at number 16 out of the top 16 teams. So they dropped a whole 6 spots from last week's projection. Now, I don't follow D1Baseball.com all that closely outside of their top 25 and their postseason projections. I don't watch all the extra podcasts and everything that they do. But apparently, for the people that do follow them closely, they say that they kind of look ahead at series that teams are getting ready to play, and their projections do incorporate that into sort of their final calculations. So I guess they think South Carolina is going to defend their home turf against Georgia, but then turn around and lose to Tennessee. And for whatever reason, that makes them the number 16 overall seed. I don't know how they get that output, but in all honesty, the thing that I would be upset about if I was Mark Kingster and one of South Carolina's baseball players is that this just doesn't make any sense because the Gamecocks went 3-1 this past week. They dispatched a really solid, by the way, East Tennessee State mid-major team, won like 15-2 in that contest. And then, yes, they did drop a game to one of the worst teams in the conference in Missouri. It should be taken into account, though, that they were playing them on the road, and they did wind up winning this series at the end of the weekend. So they still won 2-1. Not every top team in the conference has done that this year, and for the most part, a lot of these teams have struggled on the road at some point in time. So I'm not sure after all of that where they get South Carolina now being number 16 instead of number 10. If they had dropped them to like number 11 or 12, I would have understood it. But number 16, that's a little bit ridiculous. That deserves a bit of an explanation. Plus, their RPI and strength of schedule, 2 important metrics when it comes to slotting teams for the postseason in NCAA baseball, they rank 13th in both of those metrics. So maybe at the absolute worst, you could have dropped in number 13 and you still would have been able to fall back on the metric excuse. Instead, they dropped them all the way to 16. So I don't really know what to say about it, but I will say this. Even though I have had my qualms with this team, the way they performed this year, the fundamental mistakes that they've made, the pitching staff, I definitely feel like that this team at times has struggled in terms of just playing good fundamental baseball. But they have earned the right at this point to be a safe bet to be a regional host with the wins that they have over some really doggone good teams, and in certain cases, top 5, top 6, top 10 teams. North Carolina, I believe, is projected to be the number 6 overall seed. South Carolina beat them on a neutral field in a midweek game. And there are not many teams out there, particularly SEC teams, that are willing to schedule that kind of game in the middle of conference play, nonetheless, against that good of a squad. I know I probably just repeated myself once or twice there, but you get where I'm going with all that. So I'm not sure what changed in their formula to drop South Carolina 6 places, but it's a little bit ridiculous. So South Carolina, look, they obviously could get fired up over that. Now they got bulletin board material coming into this weekend against Georgia. And listen, I get it. Georgia is going to be a tough out. I'm definitely not saying they're going to win that series easily. Charlie Condon, probably the best hitter in all of college baseball. And that's over, yes, Ethan Petrie and Jack Caglione from Florida. You got to give the guy his respect. he is batting over 400 and has hit over 30 home runs. You just do not see that every single year in college baseball. But South Carolina wins that series 2-1, or maybe they sweep Georgia, which they have shown they can pull off that kind of series performance at home. I definitely would expect that they'll take a decent jump in those postseason projections. But needless to say, it'll be interesting to see what D1 Baseball continues to think about this team as the rest of the season plays out. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show as always. What are y'all's thoughts on the football team now coming out of spring? Do you think that they're going to improve or regress on both offense and defense in the passing game or run game? And lastly, what are your thoughts on D1Baseball.com docking South Carolina for a hard-earned 3-1 week this past week? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if you watch today's show on YouTube. Or you can shoot me a direct message on X at @aline_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. But as always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.